I'm James Gardner, host of Your History, Your Story, a podcast for everybody who loves stories about interesting people and events told by those who uncovered them from within their own family trees. This, we hope, will inspire you to discover and celebrate your history and your story. In this episode of Your History, Your Story, we'll be speaking with Butch Patrick, famous for his iconic role as Eddie Munster on the classic 1960s television series, The Munsters. After completing 2 seasons and 1 movie as Eddie Munster, Butch appeared in numerous other television shows and films. Butch will share some stories about his time on the set of The Munsters, and we'll talk about what it was like to work with some of his fellow co-stars, such as Gwynn, Lewis and Yvonne DeCarlo. Butch will also tell of some major struggles that he overcame as an adult, and how today he remains an enthusiastic and prominent personality in the fan community, attending conventions and celebrating the legacy of his most famous role. I'd now like to welcome Butch Patrick to our show. Welcome, Butch.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, this is very exciting for me because when I was 6 years old, the Munsters came on TV, and the music from that show, the intro, even when I hear it today, it brings back an excitement because I couldn't wait for that show to come on weekly. My brother is older than I am by 7 years, and he used to let me stay up sometimes and watch some of the old Bela Lugosi movies, the Universal Monsters. But here I was able to watch this show with my parents, and the Munsters were nice monsters. So they didn't give me nightmares.
Yeah, that's true. We were lovable.
Very, very lovable. So, Butch, I wanted to start by turning back the clock as far as you can. Where were you born, and how did you first start to get into acting?
I was born in Inglewood, California. It was near a place called Hollywood Park Racetrack. My uncle was a jockey. My grandmother owned a house in that area, and then I was born, and after my mom had me, we moved into an adjacent city called Gardena. This is a region of Los Angeles County called the South Bay, which also included Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach. Very nice, kind of like not too well-known area as far as the beach districts go, but a great place to grow up as a kid. What happened was literally the closest thing that we had to anybody in my family in the movie business was my Uncle John Lilly. Was a wrangler. He actually lived out in Newhall and married Georgia Spahn, and the last name Spahn rings the bell. It may because of the Charlie Manson, the Spahn Ranch. Oh. So we had property. My family had property way out in Newhall with horses and Western buckboards and all the stuff that Westerns needed. So John would take horses in, and his son was a stuntman. And he was Zorro's stunt double, which for me, anybody that knows Zorro, back then when we were kids, he was like a superhero, literally. So I was very enamored with that, but it had nothing to do with me getting into acting. What happened was I could ride a horse, and which led to a lot of Westerns. But my first part was accidental. And what happened was my little sister was very pretty, and my mom's girlfriend thought that she should be in modeling. So they took her, kind of like not really a Barbizon thing, but they took her up to a photographer to take some pictures. And I went along for the ride that day. And this photographer's name was Amos Carr. And if you research him, you'll find out Amos Carr was the go-to Hollywood photographer for children. And while I was sitting in the wings, he looked over and he says, "Do you mind if I take a couple pictures of your son? He's got a very, very interesting look about him. I'd love to, put a couple pictures on the window maybe." So he took a picture of me, placed it in his window on Hollywood Boulevard. And about a month later, we get a call. Apparently a director and a producer were walking down the street, noticed my picture in the window, and happened to be looking for the youngest son of Jane Wyatt and Eddie Albert in an upcoming movie that they were producing and directing, and they hadn't found the kid yet. They tracked me down. I went up for an interview. My mom asked me if I would like to go, and I said, "Well, yeah, what's it all about?" She goes, "Well, if you get it, you'll be in a movie." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She goes, "It means you won't have to go back to school for 6 weeks." I go, "Oh, okay." That now we're talking, Mike. Okay, no more second grade for 6 weeks. I went up on this interview. One of the things about me as a kid was I wasn't intimidated by adults, and I was comfortable around adults. It's kind of like wise beyond my years, and I looked about 5, but I acted about 15. So they hired me with no experience necessary. Their exact words were, "You have to start sometime." And I did this little 6-week movie, and it was a very cool little B movie with, like I said, Eddie Albert was my dad, Jane Wyatt was my mom, Brenda Lee was a 15-year-old singing sensation with my older sister, Soupy Sales was the comic relief cop, and Miss Hathaway, Nancy Culp from the Beverly Hillbillies, was the school teacher, and it took place in a school, and Eddie Albert was the principal. So anyway, during the 6 weeks, I got accustomed to the movie business of memorizing lines and hitting your mark and reading a script and all of that. And I got a couple commercials during that 6 weeks, a Kellogg's Cornflakes commercial and a Frosted Flakes commercial. And then after that, I went on another interview and I got General Hospital the first month it was ever on the air. And then after that, I started doing some Westerns and riding horses. And one thing led to another, which just started the process. So, by the time I was done with the first year of working, I'd worked about 6 different jobs and a couple movies and a series. It just kind of accidentally happened.
And didn't you act on the Real McCoys?
That was the next phase after, the series, the Real McCoys had gone off of one network and was resurrected on another network, but they didn't have the family. All they had was Amos, Luke, and Pepina, the 3 guys, and Charlie or whatever the guy neighbor's name was, an old man next door neighbor. So what they did is they had a pretty woman and her son inherit the farm next door for a love interest for Luke. And I was her son, so obviously the love interest was me riding my pony over and her coming over to chase me down, and her and Luke, little like in the Monkeys where they would put little stars in Davy's eyes. So that was the love interest, and I was her son, and I did 8 episodes of the final season, which was also good work for me, and it was working with Richard Crenna and the legendary Walter Brennan, triple Oscar winner. And I did that. And then after that, I left to go live with my grandmother in the Midwest because my mom had married a baseball player who was traded from the Angels. We were all living, happily in California. And all of a sudden, he's traded to the Washington Senators and he goes to D.C. And along with my mom and my sister and my 2 little brothers, they all go away. And I went to live with my grandmother in the Midwest in a little town called Geneseo. And that's when the Munsters casting call went out. And they literally had already hired somebody, and they showed the pilot to the networks for approval. They had for Fred Gwynn, Al Lewis, Beverly Owen, but they had a woman named Joan Marshall as the mom playing Phoebe, the character, not Lily. And they had Nate Happy Durman was playing Eddie. And the network said, we're going to greenlight the show, but we want you to put Yvonne DeCarlo in, and we want you to change the kid. And my agent caught wind of that. She reached out to him. They watched the Real McCoys and said, okay, we'll fly him out for a screen test, which is pretty unusual when you're an 11-year-old kid to get flown out. I get off the airplane. My uncle Woody, the jockey who lived in Gardena, picked me up and took me to CBS Studio Center for the screen test with Yvonne DeCarlo. And at the end of the screen test, they said, make arrangements to report to work. So, there's no house there and there's no family there other than my uncle. So what I did is I moved in with my uncle and we hired a woman that came by every morning and picked me up and was my guardian. And for the next 2 years, I did the Munsters, and that pretty much altered the trajectory of my life in a good way. I continued to do other work until I was about 21 years old, but the Munsters will always be the crown jewel of my little resume.
Wow. Were you scared at all at that age that you were going out there? You didn't have your mom with you. You had been living with your grandma. Were you nervous? Was there any separation anxiety?
No, I was a strange little kid. I was very comfortable. I was actually very comfortable with the whole process. Very adult-like, wise beyond my years sometimes. And they used to joke around with me, and they go, "There's no way that kid's 11 years old." And the good news was, all the Munster cast had kids about my age. They were all very kid friendly. It was a. You got to remember, this was a show that was produced by the guys that did Leave It to Beaver. So Joe Colley and Bob Mosier had done Leave It to Beaver. That was a groundbreaking show for a sitcom because it was a show that was actually written from the kids' point of view. It was all about the kid. The adults were the supporting cast. The kids were the stars. And with that note, and they took that spin and they integrated it into the Munsters. But the way they did it is they made Herman, Fred Gwynn, very childlike, very naive, very, very, very warm, but still very childlike. And the more I worked with Fred, they noticed that I was an adult in the room sometimes with him, and he was like a little naive and I was a little wise beyond my years. So they started writing some scripts, father and son scripts, where I would volunteer him to do things and he would not want to disappoint me. And we would, get into these antics and he would get into some mischief or, something would happen. But it was an interesting spin and an interesting twist, which was good for me because it allowed me to step to the plate where a lot of times kids in series with the family, they're sort of like a secondary character and they don't get a whole lot of stuff to do. And this one, it worked out well that they wrote several scripts that featured me and Grandpa and Herman. And that was a good thing. So by being wise beyond my years, it worked well because I wasn't a liability from the point of being able to handle dialogue and direction and this and that. So I think that was half the reason why we got along so well is I was a good kid actor and I wasn't a liability, but yet, I was still a kid. I mean, they understood that. I just did my job well.
Well, were you excited about the type of role that you had? It's kind of cool for an 11-year-old to be in a show like the Munsters with monsters and special effects and all that stuff.
I did. I enjoyed the sets immensely. I really, really did. And it's kind of a very interesting world. It's a make-believe world. You go outside the studio gates, you're back in the real world. It really is. It's a very unusual dynamic, no doubt about it. In a good way for me. I loved it. But what I really, really like when I wrote my book, Munster Memories of people and sharing what the show meant to them and how important it was. And they asked me from my point of view, what's your favorite Munster memory? And I go, my favorite Munster memory has nothing to do with being on the Munsters because the Munsters was my job and I enjoyed it. And I had a lot of fun. But my favorite memory of that 2 years was when I had free time and I'm on the Universal lot and I can go do anything and go explore anywhere I want and go check out stuff. And there was so much stuff to check out that was my greatest memory was what I got to do and how unique and how lucky I was to be able to wander around the greatest studio in the world and check up and look behind the curtain, so to speak, and see what everybody else is doing. And then have the Mike Westmore as my dear friend, let me go up to the lab and see what he's up to and go around the corner to George Barris's shop and see what he's making for Elvis or go up to the top of the hill before it was the City Walk and see the trams go by. I had a very, very wonderful 2-year period. The Munsters happened to be part of it, but being at the studio and basking in, imaginary world that everything goes on behind the studio gates was wonderful because we had a lot of studio sound stages that were used constantly for movie startups, and a movie only takes about 4 months. So each sound stage usually had at least 2 movies a year, and we had about 20 of them. So you figure there was probably over 100 movies went into production while I was there, and I tried to visit every one of them if I could. And McHale's Navy's Lagoon was one of my target destinations with Tim and Ernie. My uncle was supplying horses to Wagon Train, the Virginian, and Laredo. And I used to go up there and visit them. And then we had Alfred Hitchcock was on the lot. So there was a lot of interesting stuff to go look for.
What great memories that you have. How many people really get to see all those things? And would you often see some of the famous people, or would you just see the sets usually when you were walking around?
No, I'd say they were all in the commissary. They all ate, they all had to eat lunch, and most of them were walking. Alfred Hitchcock didn't walk; he had a car, he had a limo. But most of the time, there goes Charlton Heston from El Cid, with his Mo Howard haircut, and there's Sandra Dee and Bobby Darin. They're like the hot couple in Hollywood. There they are, those lovebirds. There goes Hitchcock. Watch out! It was crazy. It was wild. One of my favorite guys back in the day was William Smith, who was on Laredo, and he was just such a cool guy, and there was just a lot of people. They treated me very nicely, and they knew I was supposed to be there, and they knew I was a working kid, and they kind of probably cut me a little more slack than they normally would, the average guy, but they treated me well and in kind. I tried not to mess with their, I knew how to go look around without causing any disruption in production. I mean, even though the red light may be on in the door and they're shooting, you can still open the door if you know what you're doing. And you can still walk around really quietly and not trip on a wire, not kick the light, and not cause them any grief. But but my favorite thing to do was when the soundstage was struck. When they used to strike a stage and break it all down, I used to love to see what's the next thing and try to figure out what kind of movie it's going to be just by seeing what they're building and how they're doing it. Because it's going to be a western, it's going to be a period piece. Are they building a castle? Are they building a cabin? That used to be my favorite thing to do. And in about 3 or 4 days, you get a pretty good idea what they're building.
Yeah, there's so many gifted people behind the scenes who are putting together sets and makeup and all those things, lighting and music and all that. But tell me about the set of the Munsters, the famous scene of the house with the lightning and thunder and all that. What was that? What did that look like up close?
Well, here's an interesting thing of what I tell people why the show is so popular, in my opinion. 2 things. Number one, first of all, in the old days, Universal was the monster studio. They were known for Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy, all of the early 30s and 40s movies, up leading into the Abbott and Costello stuff. But anyway, they were the monster studio. So a lot of the sets, a lot of the stuff on the Munster set was actually used from Dracula's castle and the laboratory for Dr. Frankenstein and this and that. And it gave a very effective, real textured look to the Munster house. It looked like a feature. It didn't look like a TV show. It had the look of a film movie. We were shooting on film. We had an old 35 millimeter, reflex camera and a crab dolly. So it looked like the old monster movies because of the lighting and the angles and the way they shot it, which was good. Then what they did is that they took the Leave It to Beaver script and writing techniques and applied them with the Universal Monsters overtones and mushed them together into a sitcom. And the main thing that made it work so well was the characters. On paper, it probably didn't look very good, but what happened was everybody tells me this. They go, it was a believable family unit. People responded because it was a believable. You never questioned. He wasn't Frankenstein. He was Herman. It wasn't Dracula. It was Grandpa. Lily wasn't vampire. So people bought into the fact that we operated just like a normal everyday family, except we had very unusual situations going on.
The scripts are hysterical. The plots. I've been staying up late watching some of the episodes, and I'm recounting them to my wife Kelly, and she says, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah," and I said, "It is so funny,
It is funny, and it's one of the reasons that it's withstood the test of time for 60 years. Several reboots, several remakes, but literally there isn't really a weak link in the show. There was a few clunkers, but there wasn't really any bad shows, but there were some really extraordinarily good shows. And another thing is, you got to remember, we had the Westmore family doing the makeup, who were the royalty, the Barrymores of the makeup industry back then. So we had Mike Westmore, Bud Westmore, Perce Westmore doing the makeup, plus the guys that when we would leave the makeup department, we would go down to the soundstage, and we had 3 more makeup men down there to keep us all tuned up throughout the day. But the sound tracks were amazing, because now I watch them for different reasons. I watch them to look at the sets and the design and the editing, and even though it was old school special effects, smoke pots and wires and breakaway walls and this and that, it was still very effective. People really, really enjoyed it because it was quality, and then the scripts were funny. Fred and Al were one of the funniest comedy teams ever. I mean, they were really, really underrated in my opinion, but they were very, very good, and they played off each other very well. Yvonne did a wonderful job as the mom, the matriarch, and the strength of the family, and still a mom to Eddie, and a wonderful aunt to Marilyn, and keeping the household in order when these guys got out of line. But she was a big star doing TV before stars did TV. It wasn't like Elizabeth Taylor dropping in to do General Hospital. This was done way before it was cool, because before TV was second class work. Movie stars were movie stars, and TV stars were TV stars. They didn't work together. So that was an interesting twist too. And then we had the George Barris vehicles. We had extremely good guest stars, quality guest stars coming in. Some of the guys later in their careers, like Charlie Ruggles. Some guys earlier in their careers, like Don Rickles and Frank Gorshin and Jesse White, and the list goes on. I mean, there's a lot of guys. Louis Nye as Zombo was amazingly funny. One of my favorite episodes happens to be Zombo. We had great kids. Other kid actors came across. Bill Mooney guest starred in it as Little Googie. Brian Nash from Please Don't Eat the Daisies with Galen. I remember Peter Robbins, who was the voice. It was so cool for me to have Peter Robbins on the show, because I was enamored that he was the voice of Charlie Brown. So for me, I got to hang out with Charlie Brown. That was and he was Elmer. Elmer, I remember Elmer. Man, you got the neatest parents. I know, Elmer. I know. So anyway, it was a great time. It was a lot of fun.
I watched an episode the other night with Paul Lynde in it, and he is hysterical.
Yeah, Dr. Dudley. He one of my other episodes that I like is Eddie's nickname, where I grew the beard, and they take me to see Dr. Dudley and his little routine about peeking through the peephole and seeing Herman sitting there reading a magazine, and I got a paper bag on my head, and he goes, "Oh my goodness, can you imagine what he must look like if they have to cover his face with a paper bag?" As if Mr. Munster's face wasn't bad enough. So yeah, Paul Lynde was hilarious. Really good stuff. I forgot to mention he was one of my favorites as well. We had, believe it or not, when Paul Lynde left the show, Dr. Dudley, we had Dom DeLuise replace him, I believe, in his first sitcom guest star. I think it was the first time he guest starred. I think he did a variety show guest star, but I think this was his first as a character in a sitcom guest role.
Oh, okay. And I know Harvey Korman was in an episode.
He did too. Harvey did too. Yeah. He was Harvey Korman was great. We had the list goes on and on. We had Gavin MacLeod. We had, like you say, Harvey Korman. It's a very long list of great guest stars.
Yeah. And you with Eddie Munster, I got to say that you're genuinely funny because it's so much physical comedy, special effects and things. It always seems like you're dropping out of the ceiling, or something's exploding and you're going through the ceiling, or you're.
Yeah, well, they did a lot of that. They played the height of Herman and the strength of Herman off of Eddie, and the fact that Eddie, so G-pop, play catch with me, throw me through, throw me through the ceiling again. No, Eddie, after dinner, well, we can't do that. We just had the ceiling fixed. Or there was always, or go take our pet Spot, a dragon. There you go. Don't forget that. We had a lot of fun doing it. It was slapstick. It was wide open. It showed a lot of family values, even though the play on the beautiful blonde Marilyn Munster, and the fact that she was the unfortunate one to us, and she looked at us as normal family and loved us. And it was a very strong message that was sent. Don't judge a book by its cover. Believe it or not, in the mid-'60s, you were there, I was there. There was a lot of social upheaval in neighborhoods. This was a very soft-handed approach to showing people who lives next door is not don't judge them by the color of their skin. We were green, don't black and white and yellow. I mean, literally, that's one of the things that Herman says when my beard dissolves. He goes, "But did you learn anything from this?" I go, "What? I'll never make fun of mom's soup." No, it doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter if you're tall or short or fat or thin or handsome or ugly or handsome like your father. It matters the strength of your character and the size of your heart. Every time that thing comes out on the internet, it gets about 50 million views.
I loved it. I watched that one just a few nights ago. And I mean, you have the, mom and dad eating around the dinner table and having discussions. And, Herman is just a big, friendly, fun guy. But I think Yvonne DeCarlo, Lily, she and Grandpa get the best lines.
Around the dinner table when we're, darling, eat. She's talking to me, darling, eat. And Grandpa goes, I'm eating. I was talking to Eddie. Darling, eat.
So much fun. So just tell me about what was it like working with these stars with Fred and Al Lewis and Yvonne DeCarlo.
Well, Fred was really a nice guy. He had a huge workload and a lot of, the part was difficult, not only physically for him. He was pretty agile, believe it or not, in those boots. There were scenes where he would run and he would do sports and this and that. He was considering what he was wearing and how he was doing, he really did an amazing job. But I learned from Fred, the most I learned from him was about acting techniques, because there was one scene where I turned into like a beatnik hippie and when I'm playing the horn. And, I go up to my room and he goes, "Hey, baby, daddy-o." And I go, "Cool, man. Me and my horn are going to get on a jet and get us a lounge act, So he would help me with dialogue and acting lessons, which was good. I learned a lot from him. Al, on the other hand, was more cantankerous and outgoing and an activist. And he taught me a lot about life. But he was always the first one to be able to toss a frisbee or throw a baseball with me and let me be a kid and actually get some energy, get to let some steam off. And so I learned a lot about life from him. I learned a lot about acting from Fred. Yvonne I just kind of learned a lot. I learned from her just by observing her and just her presence. She had a very big star power presence. That was Yvonne DeCarlo. She was a strong broad, and using the word broad in a good way. She was old school. She used to date the Shah of Iran. She dated Howard Hughes. She dated Prince Farouk, Ali Khan. I mean, she was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful woman in the days where her and Ava Gardner and Lana Turner, I mean, she was right up there with Gina Lollobrigida and Sophia Loren. She was considered one of the world's most beautiful women. And the Shah wanted to marry her, but it was not politically correct for him being the East and her being from the West.
Wow, no kidding me. Now, one of the things that I've heard, or I understand, that you're a car guy. You're interested in cars, and what did you think about the cool car that the Munsters had? Because in TV in the '60s, you had like the Beverly Hillbillies had that truck. Yep. That car is just so cool. Whose idea was that?
Well, the producers probably decided they wanted a cool car. And when people used to ask me what was my favorite thing to do on the show, I always told them Monday morning when we read the script, we would see the script for the first time. And whenever I would see the Munster coach was going to be used, it was always a red letter day for me for two reasons. Number one, I love that car. And I knew George Barris. And when the car was used, number one, it was the coolest car on television. I got to ride in the coolest seat up and back. And then it meant we'd be outside. And I always liked the fact that whenever we got outside of the soundstage was always a nice day because the soundstage was pretty dark and dingy. But when the Munster coach was used, we were always outdoors. So that was a double bubble. And I got to know George very well. Every Wednesday, I had a little regiment. They would give me an hour and a half lunch. That way they could keep me an extra half an hour at the end of the day. And I would go have my hot dog, an apple pie, chili dog, an apple pie at Toddy's little joint about a mile off of Lancashire, up the studio gate off to the right. I go out in makeup and I go to my little place, and right across the street was George Barris' shop. And then I'd go and visit George and see what he was up to. And then I'd go to my hobby shop and go buy some slot cars were all the rage back in the 60s. And I had a huge slot car track. So I would be on Wednesday, I would always go over and add to my slot car track, either buying a piece of track or two or a car or this or that. That was my little Wednesday treat. That was visiting George, getting my chili dog and apple pie at Toddy's, and then getting back to the studio.
Now, did you actually like scary movies as a kid or not?
I'm not a huge scary movie fan. I like the original. I like the Universal monster movies. Yeah, I was more of a sci-fi Adam in the 50s with the Mars and the atomic bomb and all that stuff and space travel. That was more of my forte. I like those old movies. I love Godzilla movies and the Walking Eye and the them and Invaders from Mars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I was really big about that. And as far as scary stuff goes, I was more leaning towards like Hitchcock, Psycho, and the Birds. Mm-hmm. And the Birds. And the reason for the Birds, to me, and the Creature of the Black Lagoon again was one of my favorites because it was a believable scenario for me. I could see in the Amazon there's a possibility that there could actually be a gill man roaming around. Why not? And then the fact that the birds. If you ever see birds when they can all fly in unison and they can do this, do that, I go, if the birds ever really decided to get together and take on man, they could do some serious damage.
They would.
If they wanted to. So that always amazed me. What if they actually got in, what if they actually wanted to do that and decided to do it? If they decided to do it, they could do
it. Well, that's interesting. The Munsters were not scary. They were funny, but the special effects and the references made to Grandpa, I'm going to go dig up a few friends sort of comments. And the comedy was just so well written. But let me ask you, so the season had a 2-season run and then a movie. My question is, it's like the Honeymooners. I think the 39 episodes, 1 season and they were done. And yet, like the Munsters, 2 seasons and done. And yet in syndication, so wildly popular. How did it feel when the Munsters got canceled?
That was an interesting situation. It was kind of we were right on the cusp of all the networks going to color. So we had been a very colorful show in black and white. We've been wearing this colorful makeup for 2 years. And it seemed like the appropriate thing to do would be to go for a 3rd season, even if you had to switch networks or whatever. But what I was told, and I still don't really buy into this, but this is what I was told, what I've heard, that nobody wanted to pay for the color switch. The network didn't want to pay for it, and the producers didn't want to pay for it. So on that note, they knew syndication was on the forefront, although it didn't really exist yet. They knew it was going to exist. So they decided to do a color movie. And the movie could be released worldwide as a feature, which would then educate the world to what the Munsters were, because normally other countries don't get reruns for about 4 or 5 years. It takes that long. So they thought if they would fast track this feature film and get it out worldwide, it would make the sale and the syndication an easier sell. My thoughts were that may be very well be, but I believe that Fred and Al had had enough of the show, and I think they were homesick for New York. And I think Fred had a tragedy in his personal life. Al had a tragedy as well with his wife getting in a bad car wreck and losing an eye. So I think they just felt that the scripts were getting thin. The show had run its course. New York was where they belonged. And I just think the combination of all those things just it just ran its course. And there's a lot of very famous shows that ran 2-3 year runs that are very big in syndication. And the Munsters is one of them.
Well, thankfully, we have 70 great episodes to watch now. It's fantastic. I tried to get my grandson interested in watching them. When I first started having him watch, he was like 8 years old, but he's 10 now. So I'm going to try to reintroduce them to him and see if he'll enjoy them the second time around. But I love them.
I get a lot of kids enjoy it. I mean, some of them maybe it's not everybody, but I'd say about 75% of the kids that are introduced to it like it, and a lot of times they're introduced to it because they're watching it with someone that they love, like Grandpa or their favorite uncle. And that's one of the stories that in my book is I get all these stories of people walking up and bearing their soul and sharing their stories about how important the show was to them, and it was one thing that they could get along with, or one thing they all loved at the same time, and that's pretty amazing. And then some people use it for therapy. They were very depressed, and they would go in the room and watch the Munsters, and they would feel better about stuff. It's nuts how many different ways it affected a certain amount of people back. You're looking at something 60 years ago.
That's terrific. Now, when the show stopped, I know you were on some shows that many people have heard of, like I Dream of Jeannie and Gunsmoke, The Monkees. What was it like after the Munsters, and what happened with acting with you?
I continued working. I was never an actor. I was a kid that had a knack for acting. I was not an actor. My mom probably drove by school, and I went on maybe a third of the interviews that she came by for. And it drove her crazy, and it drove my agent crazy, but they never forced me. They would offer it, and I'd say, no, I don't want to go up for that, or there's a lot of traffic, or I'm playing baseball and this and that. And had I lived closer to Hollywood, and had I pursued it seriously and wanted to ring up some numbers, I could have worked a lot more. I was a regular kid who happened to have a knack for acting, and that's exactly how it worked out. I only worked maybe 6-7 times a year. And I did it for 17 years or 16 years. Yeah, 15, 16 years. So I got about, I got like 90 credits, but I got 4 series in there. I have the Real McCoys, I have the Munsters. I did 9 episodes of My Three Sons, and I did Lidsville and General Hospital. But that was only, it happened to be the first month, but it was a series, and it was more than 1 episode. So what I did is I got a lot of interesting stuff mixed in, but I had one really big summer when I did the Monkees, the Phantom Toll Booth, and I did 2 Disney World of Colors, both 2-parters. And I was 14 and a half and 15 that particular year. That was a big summer because Disney was the gold standard. Chuck Jones's only feature film they ever did, gold standard. Monkees, very top of their game, and an 8th grade kid going and spending a week with them was amazing because I was so excited. And then that was a big, and then they put a big ad for my agent, placed an ad in Variety for me that year, and I had a big plug in the middle of the trades because I had 4 major parts all simultaneously airing, within a month or 2 of each other. But I could have done more, jumped into features and stuff, but I just I wasn't meant to be an actor. I was just meant to just be a regular kid who had an interesting little run of it, and I'm glad I did it. It's been good to me, but I never wanted a career in it. Wasn't meant to be.
And then when you gave up acting, what happened? I understand you had some real challenges in your life.
Well, what happened is I'm 15 years old, and it's 1968 and 69, and the whole world is peace, love, counterculture, hippie movements happening. Everybody's smoking weed, and that interested me. I wanted that lifestyle, as did a lot of people. The difference is for me is the summer of '69. I got my first serious girlfriend in April of '69. I'm doing Marcus Welby in July, about 10 days before my birthday, and they're landing on the moon. So that's a big thing. I get my car August 2nd. About a week later, Manson starts killing people right up where my girlfriend lives at the top of Laurel Canyon. Everybody's freaking out. A lot of stuff happening. Once I got the keys to my car when I turned 16, I was never home. I was gone. My car was my rocket ship, and I was go, never around. And literally, you could find weed, you could do this, you could do that. And I was experimenting with stuff at 16 years old, but that's what I wanted to do. And a lot of people were doing it. Bad behavior was not frowned upon. But the big key was a friend of mine asked me for a ride to go up for a movie interview for him. I gave him a ride up. When he came out of the interview, the producer named Hall Bartlett looked at me and he goes, "Butch Patrick." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Have you got a minute?" I go, "Yeah." So I went in and I read for the part that Rick came out of. He didn't want Rick. He was too ethnic. Black hair Italian kid. He wanted more of a angelic blonde, whatever. And that was me. So anyway, I wound up getting the part of this movie. 4 days later, I'm in Brazil the next day for 3 months with no teacher and no parent. All I got to do is show up for work.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Everything. French camera crew, Chinese caterers, Brazilian actors, and Brazilian crew, and an American. We got 6 American between the director and Hall, and he's married to Rhonda Fleming. Rhonda Fleming's down there with Hall Bartlett. And for the next 3 months, I showed up for work every morning, did my job. Everything was going great. But as my sister says in my AA, when I got my 1-year chip, she says, he left as Richie Cunningham and he came back as John Lennon. That was how my life made a huge turn, probably for the worse. I hate to use the word worse, but that's how I became a full-fledged party animal. And then I was only 16 years old. Now, what happened was when the movie Billboards on Sunset Boulevard, the movie wins a bunch of awards, Moscow Film Festival. I'm going to get a nomination for Best Supporting Actor. My life is going to change radically, and I'm not going to be a TV star anymore. I'm going to be a movie star. And I was ready for that because I used to wonder, why do I have to keep going on all these interviews over and over and over again when isn't it the point of once you get enough of a resume and you're working enough that you might have to, I'm not asking them to just hire me over the phone, but there's got to be something other than just walking in the same way over and over and over and over, and proving yourself over and over and over. So I was looking for the movie star status thing, intrigued me. I thought that would be cool. So what happened was the movie got all these awards, Billboards on Sunset, everybody's raving about it, and Hall and Rhonda get a divorce. And in the divorce, she gets half the rights to the movie, and he, out of spite, he shelved it. So the movie was never released. So the movie is never released. Now I'm almost 18. Lidsville comes along, and Sid and Marty Krofft reach out to me to do this Saturday morning show, which, at the time I wasn't really happy about it. I didn't give it a fair shot because I was kind of still pissed off about the movie. But I did it. And I worked 11 weeks at Paramount the summer I turned 18 on the Saturday morning kids show, which I thought was, beneath me at the time, which it wasn't, but my attitude was such that I'm doing it for the money. I sold out. And the reason I did the movie was my friends in high school, the Cowsills, I told them about it. I go, they want me to do this series. I'm not going to do it. They go, well, you never turn down work. You never turn down work. They go, it's 11 weeks. When's it on? Saturday morning. Your friends will all be asleep. Nobody will ever see it. So I go, well, that's probably true. So I did it, and it turned out to be a hit. 2 years on ABC, 2 years on NBC. But for 4 years, I got a solid paycheck coming in every week for 11 weeks of work, which was pretty good. But that just led to me having more access to money to do bad things.
Yeah.
So I was 22 years old. When I was 18, the last year of the Vietnam draft, I was number 41. And then when you're under 100 in the draft, you're going to Vietnam. So I figured I was going to Vietnam. I went to the courthouse. You're not supposed to get your money until you're 21. I just turned 18. I could vote at 18. I could go to Vietnam at 18. I could get killed at 18. So I went up and I petitioned the court, and they actually changed the law to let you get your money before you're 21. I got it out when I was 18 and a half. Went out and spent it all thinking I was going to Vietnam. And then I went up for my induction physical, and they found out I had a bad knee from a skiing accident that I wasn't aware of. I mean, I knew about the accident. I just didn't know my knee was bad. And I had a 1H exemption. So I didn't have to go to Vietnam, which was a good thing. Bad thing was I'd already blown all my money. So I had about 10 grand left, which back in 1971, 10 grand was still a sizable amount of money. And my cars were paid off and all my stuff. I was okay. But that was that from 16 to 19, that 3-year window, just everything was upheaval and partying and fast cars and faster women and loads of drugs. And for me to be accepted to my peers, which I wanted to do, I wanted to be accepted as a regular guy. My way of doing that was always throwing the best parties and always having the beer and the fast cars and financing the ski trips and whatever, or the ski boat or trips to Lake Havasu. I overcompensated to be regular guy for 41 years.
For 41 years. Yeah, I hate to fast forward the 41 years, but there is an incredible story that you came out of the addiction. And could you tell us about that?
There were decades of this and decades of that, and I was always pretty good at making money. I could figure out a way to make a buck. I, opened up a couple small businesses. I was always big in those service-related businesses. People that were rich and didn't want to. I had my dad owned a poker casino. I worked in that for a while, but I didn't like gambling because people when they're gambling are like grumpy, and it's like they take it out on you as if I lost their money for them. So I didn't like that. But I always liked cars, so I buy and sell cars and hustle there and hustle there. And then one thing led to another. Once in a while, I get a sidebar job, regarding the business, and it's like acting. It's like riding a bike; you never really forget. Did a few things like that. I used to buy and sell cars, send them to Australia. But I was just always hustling, kind of like a horse trader. Back in the old days, just whatever was available at the time. Put your thinking cap on and figure out a way to make a buck. Buy low, sell high, that kind of thing. And every decade had a different drug. We've had the cocaine with I was on the cocaine wagon way before that movie Blow with Johnny Depp. Oh my God, that's me. That's exactly where I was living at that time. But that was going on then, and then we were, hustling weed and this and that. And then that went out, and then Quaaludes came in, and then that went out, and speed came in, and that went out, and opiates came in, and there was always a flavor of the decade type of thing. Participated in it heavily, got into a lot of trouble, but survived it. And when I decided to get sober in 2010, I had been thinking about it for about 10 years. And, I knew that this had to come to an end sooner or later. This was not good. And it took me almost 10 years of thinking about it. And in the last 5 years, I started talking to my friends from school that got sober. Every once in a while, I'd have a real bad hangover. I'd reach out to them, and the seed was planted. And it just took me 5 years to get around to it. And I finally went into Oasis Treatment Center at the age of 57, into a treatment center that was basically all kids. There was a few older guys, but mostly kids, because the kids today were all stealing, opiates from their grandparents' medicine chests for their ailments and for their pain medication or whatever they had. And the funny part was, I liked it. I got the message. I never relapsed. I'm at 13 and a half years now, but 9 months into it, I went up for my physical, as people do, and they found out that I had prostate cancer. And a real aggressive form of prostate cancer, small mass, big number. So, and the guy looked at me and goes, "You're not very upset about this." And I go, "It's just ironic." I go, "I've been trying to kill myself 40 years with alcohol and drugs, and now I get sober, and it's just so poetic justice that now cancer is going to kill me because my life's in order." It didn't bother me. I thought it was like ironic, because I thought I'd be dead at 30. When I was a kid, I never thought I'd make it past 30. I just didn't think I would, and I did. So I looked at it as, okay, I had 37, 38 years past what I thought I had. 27, 28, excuse me. But what happened was there was a guy in there that was a world-class doctor who happened to be there for a situation, of a personal situation. And he turned me on to his rock star ninja buddies, doctors in Santa Monica, and they rushed me through the process. And I did he told me what to do and what I was going to do and how it's going to happen. And he said, "You're getting it removed. You're not going to do this radiation. You're not going to do this. You're going to go in. You're going to get it removed. That's that." And I did. And when I went back a month later for the pathology report and the test to see if I was, if I was cancer free, I was. And they go, "But we're going to tell you something. We didn't think we got it. We thought it had spread to your bones, because the numbers just didn't they didn't mesh. You know, the amount we got to the amount of numbers that you had out, we thought it had spread, and it had. So I just snuck it under the wire, and that's been 12 and a half years.
Well, thank God. That is wonderful. Now, if you were not getting sober or sober, might you have just blown by the whole thing and not gotten the
I would have
check?
looked at it. I was trying to figure out, before I got sober, I literally was drinking myself to death. I was drinking 30 beers a day. I was just wanted, I didn't see a way out. I didn't see a future. I pretty much had hit bottom, and I was there, and I was stuck there. And I just was thinking, well, how's this going to end? You know, and one thing led to another, and I got involved with a project with some friends, and I got through it. But man, was it hard. I mean, it was, I used to have to get up in the middle of the night and drink 2 beers because I couldn't get through a sleep cycle without alcohol. And I was fighting it, and, you know, hiding it, and then pounding some beers in the morning, getting to work, getting through the day, half a day, getting to lunch, pound a couple more beers. It was brutal. It was tough. I was never like a flask carrier and doing this. It was more just cold beer. You know, that was pretty much it, but a lot of it. So the guy that was working with me on that project, I confided him, and I told him I needed some, you know, I was having some bad go of it. And then I went out and I did a Halloween thing in Philadelphia, and I actually made a ton of money. And I had all this money. And, you know, you usually think when somebody's an alcoholic and they're down and out, they're like broke, and they're over in the corner next to a dumpster or something. And here I'm like sitting on 20 grand. And I just decided that this is, before I blow through this, I got to figure out a plan. And the people that were with me decided that they reached out for me, and it was like a God shot. They opened up the Yellow Pages in California to rehab centers, and it was and it was called Oasis. They called them up for me, and the woman that answered the phone, Stacy, said, "Yeah, hi, and I would like to speak to someone about bringing in a celebrity for rehab." And she goes, "His name?" And they said the name. She goes, "Oh, hold on, I got to get Jim for this." And Jim A., who's the owner, Jim and Kathy A. owned it, had always wanted to take a celebrity who had been out in the, you know, not in the rooms, but out, you know, out playing and partying for a long time, and get him sober. Because if they could do that, they felt that that person could help a lot of people through the exposure that the media would give him. So Jim's dad loved the Munsters. And Jim, the 2 things that happened was, I had never been in a rehab, so I qualified there. And number 2, his dad liked the Munsters, and he sponsored me, and it was only like $35,000. And I flew out to California. I was in the East Coast at the time. And I fell asleep on the plane. I remember I had 3 Budweisers on the plane, and got off the plane, fell asleep in the back seat, woke up on the property right next to Disneyland, and never had a drink, and never had another line, another pill, never had another joint, had nothing. Absolutely cold turkey on everything. I wanted it. I learned it. And I learned it. I earned it. I kept my mouth shut, my ears open, and listened to what he had to say. And we're still friends today. And I stayed in sober living almost 3 years. And now I help people. You know, people call me all the time about, you know, the one thing about sobriety and the world we live in is every family's got somebody that needs help. I mean, it is what it is. It's an epidemic, and everybody knows someone that needs help. My job isn't to fix everybody, but I do make myself available to help them start the process, because a lot of people just don't know where to turn. You know, where do we start? How do we do it? And the good news is there is a lot of help out there. The bad news is there's a lot of people that need the help, but the good news is there are ways to do it and help people just get them to the right person to start the process.
That's the first step. That, you know, you're doing such great work, Butch. I'm so thankful that we've been able to speak with you, and not only just about your very interesting career, but also, and the people you've met and the things you've seen, but also, you know, overcoming the addiction. You know, you got connected with the right people, but you did the work too.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about it was, my biggest fear was I would never have fun anymore. Now, I mean, literally, that was it. My whole life was just, it had morphed into nothing but alcohol. Go to a bar, New Year's Eve, weddings, just everything had something of alcohol related nature to it. Plus, I was addicted to alcohol. You know, I was an alcoholic, a bad alcoholic. But my biggest thing was, if I get sober, I'll never have fun. What am I going to do in my life? What will I do? How will I have fun? Was my biggest fear. The neat part about getting sober is it's the coolest club you can be part of. It's the cool club. And the reason it's a cool club, you'd be surprised that most alcoholics don't really say they were alcoholics. Some are very open about it, and they are, but there's some really famous people, rock stars, movie stars, really good people who are big numbers. I mean, I got 13 years. I'm serious. They know I'm serious about it now. But when you first start, everybody thinks early on, oh, I got 9 months. And it's a good start. It's important, but you can't be bragging that you're sober at that point. That's how you relapse. So, but after they get to about 5 years and people who are in the program notice you and they know you've got 5 years, they kind of start coming up to you and sharing a little bit of their stories and letting you know that you're doing the right thing and you're one of the biggest compliments I ever got was a gentleman named Kane Hodder. He told me, he said, Butch, he goes, when I first met you, I would move my table not to be near you. I didn't want to be around you. He goes, now I request to be next to you. He goes, I'm so proud of you. He goes, but seriously, he goes, you're just day and night. He goes, I honestly would avoid you like the plague. And that's the type of thing when people start noticing, and the more time you get, the more interesting people you meet, successful people. Alice Cooper's a good example. Danny Trejo, Rob Lowe. There are so many cool, sober people out there in the industry and outside the industry, just in any walk of life. And once you get some numbers under your belt and you start meeting these people, you find out that there's a lot of fun to be had. And number two is there's a very cool club to be part of. Boom.
Absolutely. This has been a really enjoyable conversation, but
Thanks.
I'm also so thankful that you were able to have your prostate removed, that you didn't have any spread of the disease. Some of our listeners have heard me speak on prostate cancer, and I did have it myself, and I had surgery like you did, and I'm now 9 years cancer free. I can't say enough out there to men to get checked. Make sure you get checked, and it's very important. I wanted to ask you, what are you up to now? What kinds of things are you up to, and how can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Well, this is going to be hard to remember, so get a pen and a paper, write this down, Munsters.com. Very hard to remember. That will lead you to everything I do. That gets you, I've had that website for now about 35 years, and it leads to the store, it leads to it leads to that. But mainly what I do is I'm very excited to be working for the 60th anniversary of the show. I came up with this idea. I love, because, I have a Dragula and I have a Munster coach and I have an Eddie Chopper, because you were mentioning the George Barris cars.
Yep.
My favorite thing to do is to go around the country and work with small towns and be part of their festivals, whatever the town is famous for, get involved with that and show off the cars and meet families and meet 3 generations of Munster fans, work with the Chambers of Commerce to whatever good cause they've got going on. I really enjoy working that. And with the 60th anniversary and Route 66 turning 100, I do a lot of road stuff. And I'm working with the Drive-In Owners Association of America to do movie nights, Munster Mondays or Throwback Thursdays or Wayback Wednesdays, midweek, when they're not showing the big features that they're obligated to show. I'm working with the drive-in community to do special events at their properties, which I used to love driving as a kid. So this gives me a nostalgia-driven road trip, small town thing that I really enjoy doing. Plus, I'm very excited that in Savannah, I was buying a hearse. I had a haunted attraction last year, and I was buying a hearse. And a gentleman in Savannah contacted me, and he invited me down, and I did a car show in Savannah, and we went on a ghost tour. And he has his hearses are basically altered to where you can step up the back and sit in the roof, and he does the ghost tours. Instead of walking, he drives you around in these hearses with 10 people sitting in these hearses. And he and I have decided to open up a property for people to go after they go on their ghost tour, to come in to this Ghost Bar and Magic Cafe, which we're opening, which features magic, karaoke. There's a clown troupe that tours, that they're tired of touring, so they do juggling and magic and this and that. So we're going to have a destination for people that do the ghost tours in Savannah. And if it works well, we're going to do one in St. Augustine, and then we're going to do one in Myrtle Beach. So it's kind of a restaurant, bar situation. And another thing is I can hang out at bars now too. I don't go in there to drink, but I certainly go in there to meet and greet people. It's just a different style. So yeah, I'm working on a property like that as well. So I'm keeping busy.
Well, you certainly are, and I want to thank you. Are you going to be in New Jersey anytime in the near future?
Just once. That's where my car club is. My car club is called Dead Man's Curve. We have a Labor Day car show. If you look it up, called Dead Man's Curve Car Club. Best group of guys, between the car club guys and the sober guys. I'm in good company, coming and going. My girlfriend lives in New Jersey, actually. She lives in Vernon, up by the ski slope. Are you in Jersey?
I'm in Jersey. I'm in North Jersey. I'm about 18 miles due west of Manhattan.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be at there's a drive-in up there too. I'm going to be talking to some people at drive-ins. But yeah, I do get into Jersey because obviously my girlfriend's there, but I probably will be back there for Labor Day.
I'm looking forward to it. And if you're nearby, we're definitely coming to see
That
you.
would be wonderful. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Butch, thank you so much. And for everybody listening, Munsters.com. You can learn all there is to find out about Butch Patrick. Thank you so much for all the work you've done and the inspiration you are to many people.
You are more than welcome. Thank you.
All right, Butch, have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Your History, Your Story. Please subscribe, share, and check out our website at yourhistoryyourstory.com for episode notes and bonus content. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, comments, or a story to tell. Be well and God bless.